morning, everyone, and welcome to this high-level political forum side event organized by Sulitest. So since 2016, Sulitest movement have actively participated to the HLPF, particularly as a co-chair of the UN Higher Education Sustainability Initiative. So AZ bring together all the UN bodies related to higher education, and we have just concluded our global forum last Monday that you can watch on the UN AZ website. But today, for this side event, we are delighted to bring together major stakeholders who have been collaborating with us for years, each contributing in their own way to transforming higher education towards sustainability. Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, mentioned a few days ago that we are still, unfortunately, very far from achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. If we want to give ourselves a chance, we have no time to waste. It's urgent to accelerate the movement to move from isolated good practices to widespread implementation. This requires collaboration, sharing of good practices, inspiration, imitation, and improvement, and above all, precise measurement of the impact of our action. Sustainability is not a new topic in higher ed, but it's clear that since ranking, rating, and accreditation have embraced the topic, it has switched from a marginal handled by a few activists to a serious subject for higher education institutions. Today, we have the privilege to welcome an institution whose mission is rather to support their members or to measure these efforts or the impact of them. To set the scene, we will start our event by sharing with you the major trends in knowledge through the data produced by our Sulitest flagship tool, Task. Then Gabriela, who led the faculty engagement survey, will explain the importance of considering the diversity to support them towards sustainability. We will then have two amazing panels. Our first panel will bring together the leading actors in ranking, rating, and accreditation. This panel will be moderated by John North, who leads GRLI, one of the oldest and the most inspiring networks, and one of the earliest supporters of Sulitest movement. Kat Ng from McGill and our spokesperson at UNESCO will then moderate the second panel, bringing together some of the most important academic networks on sustainability. We decided to hold this event online this year to allow as many people as possible to benefit from our prestigious panelists. This event is being recorded and will be available on the Sulitest website in a couple of days. Before handing over to my friend and partner Aurélien, with whom we co-create Sulitest, I also would like to warmly thank Prime for assisting us in organizing this event. Thank you very much. Aurélien, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, JC. Really happy to host this event for the HLPF this year. I'm Aurélien Descamps. I'm the co-founder of Sulitest. At Sulitest, our mission is to enable universities and organizations with tools and data to mainstream sustainability literacy. We know we are only one piece of the puzzle, but we are convinced that we are a missing and crucial one. Next slide, please. Our flagship tool called Task for the assessment of sustainability knowledge was launched in March 2023, so a bit more than 1 year ago, being the first online standardized assessment to monitor sustainability knowledge. The mission of Task is to allow universities to make sure their students and graduates have sufficient knowledge and a common understanding of sustainability. It should also allow universities to pilot their curriculum change and to inform their pedagogy. And last but not least, it should allow universities to demonstrate their impact on sustainability knowledge and learners to demonstrate their understanding of sustainability. This is why we have launched Task to produce meaningful and impactful data to shift higher education towards sustainability. Today, during this event, we are launching officially our annual report for the HLPF, where you will find the in-depth data analysis that we conducted with a bit more than 1 year of Task use. In order to set the scene, I will rapidly give you some insight about the potential of those data. So since we launched Task in March 2023, a bit more than 17,000 people have taken Task. in about 60 universities from 12 countries and almost 150 nationalities represented in this sample. So the data that I will quickly present to you now are coming from this sample of task taker. Next, please. So first, if we look at scores at a glance, we can see that the adjusted average score is about 52. The range of scores got from 0 to 100 at task. We call it adjusted average score because we removed the people who answer randomly with a very small timing to answer to task. So about 52 on average, with a quite balanced distribution around the average, as you can see on the screen right now. If we want to have a look at the distribution, we can see that for score that are higher to 70, you are among the 30% of the top scores at task. So of course, the sample will grow as task is used. We should take those preliminary data with caution. It gives you a first overview of what are the average score. Next, please. When we launched task, the goal was, of course, to provide a robust, reliable, and comparable measure with a systemic perspective of sustainability, the global understanding of sustainability, tapping into earth science, social foundation of human welfare, but also levers of action, but also to provide score in the detailed subjects that are covered in our domain of knowledge. So as you can see here, you have the three main frameworks of our domain of knowledge: Earth system, human welfare, levels of opportunity, with quite balanced average score on these three frameworks. But if we look inside those three big frameworks, we can see some disparities between topics. Let's take Earth science first. Earth science, we can see that the three top subjects are climate change, ocean acidification, and pollution with novel entities. Those are the top score, whereas we have more technical subjects such as biogeochemical flows or atmospheric ozone loading, where the scores are less important in the current knowledge of our 17,000 task takers. Let's look at social foundation of human welfare. The top scores comes from nutrition, health, basic income and decent work, gender equality and education. If we look at those scores, we can see that, for example, water use, human settlement, and peace and justice are subjects for which we have lower score in our current sample. And finally, how to act on sustainability, the levels of opportunity to have an action towards sustainability. It's a bit more balanced than the two first frameworks. The majority of topics are quite equivalent when we look at infrastructure planning, natural resource management, economic consideration, whether they are macroeconomic or microeconomic, sustainability science, and how to conduct change through transformative change or cognitive capacity. The two subjects that have lower score in this part are governance and innovation and technology. So this is a very descriptive average score of our metrics, but this granular data should inform pedagogy and the development of learning material to learn about sustainability in a systemic way. Next, please. Now let's look at SDGs. All our questions are tagged to the different SDGs, so we managed to produce average score, again, from our current sample of task takers on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. What we see is that poverty, nutrition, health, education, and climate are the 5 top SDGs in our sample. If we look at other SDGs, it's quite balanced. We have no SDGs with a very low score or no SDG with a very higher score than others, but infrastructure, innovation, and economic growth and decent work are the ones for which we have slightly lower score. In addition, peace and justice, which is consistent with the subject of the task matrix that I showed just before. So again, this is a preliminary mapping, but we have a first insight of the current knowledge of the 17 SDGs. Next, please. Now, on the preliminary analysis, we can start to look at score progress, because on some of the universities that are using task, some of them deciding to ask their students to take task several times. For example, we recommend using task as an entry and exit test on a specific program or on a specific curriculum in order to track progress on the sustainability knowledge of the students. So it's really a subsample. You have here a bit more than 500 students who have taken task several times since we launched it in March 2023, but most of them took task twice, and some of them took task a third time. Sorry. So what do we see? You have all the statistic and the detailed statistic in the report. We have quite a balance between increased score and decreased score. But two interesting things can be noted. The magnitude of change is higher for increasing score than decreasing score. So the progress is higher than the decreased score. It's about 16 points earned on average for increased score out of 100, and between 6 to 8 for the decreased score. So this is the first lesson learned from the task score progress. There is a potential for progression and a bigger potential for progression in learning about sustainability when you use tasks to track progress in the learning pathway of students. The second interesting thing to note is the fact that most of the score that decreased, the candidates have a slightly high score at the first test. So they score, most of them score above 60, not all of them, but a significant part of them above 60. So our interpretation, and of course we have confirmed that with a more disseminated use of task, but we could think that the students who already earned a high score the first time they take task, they already earned a certificate with a high score. The incentive to take the second task very seriously and to confirm their high score might be a bit less. The third interesting element here is that when you are motivated enough to take task a third time, most of the score are increasing for the third take of task. Next, please. Finally, to give you an overview of the analysis that we have conducted out of the task data, we have conducting regression to identify the main determinants of score. So you have the detail of this regression in the report once again, but let me give you the main lessons learned here. First, in terms of age and gender, the impact is quite low. Age has a slightly positive impact on the score, but it's really light. And gender, female have a slightly higher score, not always significant depending on the sample that we are taking. So overall, quite low score, quite low impact on the scores. The bigger impact is coming from education. Education matter. The level of degree has a clear, statistically significant positive impact on the score. Education for sustainability also significantly matter. The more training you received on sustainability, the higher score you will have at task. It's confirming, it's not a big surprise, but we have statistics that are demonstrating it in a significant way. And last but not least, on the survey variable that we have on task, we ask for the self-perceived expertise. What is interesting to note is that having some declaring that I have some knowledge or moderate knowledge have a significant positive impact on the score, and a bigger impact than declaring myself as an expert. So this is a really interesting result for us. Of course, we should dig into that for the interpretation, but we think that we interpret that by saying that when you are an expert, you usually are an expert on one subject, and we bring a systemic perspective of sustainability. So the topical expert, Gabriela will talk a little bit about that with the faculty survey just after me. They have a good score on their subjects, of course, but on the systemic perspective, not necessarily a better score than others. And the second interpretation is about the newcomers. A lot of people have discovered the topic recently, and they have discovered probably the magnitude of the thing they have to learn to have a systemic perspective of sustainability. Next, please. To conclude, this is, of course, preliminary analysis and preliminary data analysis. Look at our report that is available to have a more in-depth view on the data that we have on task. And of course, the more task is used, the bigger the data set will be, and the more meaningful the data will be to inform a shift of higher education towards sustainability. 3 calls for action to finish. Distribute tasks, use tasks to enhance this data set, use the data to inform your curriculum change and your pedagogy as a university, integrate the data for quality assurance and assessing impact. We will have a discussion in this event around this subject, and share your success stories. We have about 60 universities using task, and we have change leaders that are learning from their peers and sharing their success stories. This is the best way to get inspired and to mainstream sustainability literacy. Thank you very much. And let me now hand it over to Gabriela, who will talk a little bit about our survey for faculty engagement.
In the next 10 minutes, I'll go quickly over some of our main insights and findings for our global faculty engagement survey. So it all started with this gauge, this diagram that you see there, that the Sulitest team developed for a preliminary typology of faculty engagement in sustainability issues. So this typology aims to categorize how faculty members participate and contribute or not to sustainability efforts within their own academic communities. So we built it based on 10 years of experience of the Sulitest Association with higher education stakeholders through observations and interactions with faculty and universities and our own community of change leaders. So I'll explain a little bit more in detail the diagram itself. So we have to the left, the obstructionists. So those are the individuals who feel that the urgency of addressing sustainability is actually overstated. It's not as pressing than it is portrayed. So those who are actually not that interested or engaged in the issue at all. In the middle, we have the emerging transitionalists. So those who might be aware of the challenges that humanity faces, but they are oblivious as to how this connects to their own work and their topics that they teach within academia, or perhaps they even are aware and troubled by all the sustainability issues, but they don't really know where to start. And lastly, to the right, we have the activists. So this was what Aurélien was mentioning. We have the systemic experts and topical experts. So the first ones, they're those highly qualified faculty members who grasp the complex systems around sustainability and really offer interdisciplinary support, and the topical experts who are experts in a specific topical areas such as climate change or biodiversity, and do provide valuable knowledge and training. Lastly, under the activists, we have the new enthusiasts. So it's those individuals who are recently aware of sustainability and climate-related issues and are dedicated to curricular reform, and they bring that extra dose of enthusiasm and energy for the others. So using this gauge, we actually published it in an article at the EFMD Business Magazine. You have the QR code there if you're interested in having a look. And after publishing it, when discussing with our partners, we did see that this sort of faculty segmentation was a shared subject. So it was something that was equally observed by our collaborators and other stakeholders. So that's why we decided to launch this global survey to see how other faculty members around the world and other stakeholders perceived this matter. So our survey had 425 responses from over 42 different countries with a diversity of different profiles represented. And for more information on the respondents, we do recommend checking out the dedicated report, and I'll share it with you at the end. We'll share it. So supporting faculty with tools and training is definitely crucial for any higher education institution that wants to integrate sustainability within its curricula. But for this to be effectively done, it is essential for us to really understand what are the targeted populations, in this case, the faculty, and adapt strategies accordingly. So the objectives for this survey were twofold. Firstly, to understand how sustainability is being implemented within the faculty and identify what are some of the main obstacles to its implementation. And then also gather examples of training levers, tools, and engagement strategies that are tailored to different faculty profiles, and also identify the most suitable approaches for impact. So let's get down to the data and the results that we found. So we asked our respondents whether they have ever encountered resistance or opposition to sustainability initiatives within their faculty. So what data indicates here is that faculty are encountering less opposition in the past few years compared to previously. However, at the same time, we do see that in certain institutions, opposition, which was quite rare 10 years ago, is now becoming more common. So it's this mixed batch of experiences where some faculty might experience more opposition due to what we think is increasing popularization and polarization on this subject. Other faculty do face less opposition, and this is perhaps due to transformations occurring at the institutional level. Next, we asked respondents whether they ever saw instances where educators in their institutions were aware of the challenges posed by sustainability issues, but they face a certain deficit of knowledge or a lack of guidance. So here what we see is that the growing awareness, there is definitely a growing awareness of the need to integrate sustainability within curricula. This growing awareness is actually outpacing the increase in support for these issues. So in other words, what we see here is that sustainability is gaining traction. However, there's not enough training, there's not enough guidance for the faculty. Next, we asked whether respondents have come across well-qualified sustainability educators who are actively engaged in sustainability, in bringing that into their primary areas of expertise and job responsibilities. And what we see is that the number of actively engaged educators has definitely been increasing over time. They were almost non-existent 10 years ago, which is when we started asking this question, and they have been becoming more and more common over the past years. So we do see this as a growing community. Following this first series of questions, we wanted to gain a better understanding of who are the agents of change and to identify methods of faculty training. So we gathered different information on the different profiles representing the levels of engagement. So that gauge that I first presented, we asked that for each profile, participants share engagement strategies they have either observed or experimented. These were all open text responses, which were examined afterwards using a text-embedded cluster analysis, which helped us organize and categorize large amounts of data. So the results that we gathered from this question is that there are defined strategies, particularly for the new enthusiast profile. So this profile, again, is those people who are just recently aware of sustainability issues and they feel quite committed to it with a lot of energy. So there has on the results, on the responses, we do see a common emphasis on leveraging the energy and enthusiasm of this profile through targeted training and mentorship to drive systemic change. Other profile groups showed less distinct strategies, but responses did highlight the need for a holistic approach and for customizing strategies to suit different populations. So here on the slide, we do have a couple of quotes taken from the survey just to illustrate our point, but you can find several other quotes in our report. We also asked after asking about the engagement strategies, we also wanted to know some of the significant obstacles that the respondents have identified, again, specific to the profiles. So analysis showed that there were 2 profiles that had more distinct obstacles. You can see here with the quotes. So on the left, we have the new enthusiasts again. Some of the obstacles include maintaining their motivation and focus, the risk that they might burn out, and this need for guidance to create some lasting change. On the right, we have the deniers. Those are the people who are least engaged, so on the opposite side of our gauge. And obstacles include deeply held beliefs, resistance to change, susceptibility to conspiracy theory, etc. So apart from these 2 profiles, it seems that obstacles are actually quite similar and common for all profiles, and they include lack of time, work overload, fear of change, amongst others. So what are some of the conclusions we can come up with following these results? So over the past 10 years, sustainability has definitely gained traction within higher education. This is seen through all our results. The perception among our respondents suggests that at the same time they have more allies, more collaborators, more assistants, they also have an increase in opposition to sustainability initiatives within their institutions. These institutions, they also seem to have started implementing some tools and structures to support the faculty, but it's still done in a massively heterogeneous way. It's not very strategic. It's not very organized. And lastly, there is no tailored strategy for engaging with these different faculty profiles, apart from a little bit in new enthusiasts and the deniers. So this is something we feel is definitely a topic worth exploring further. And lastly, also some recommendations for action here. To begin with, we recommend using data-driven methods to tailor and refine these sustainability profiles within each institution. The purpose being that to ensure that these engagement strategies are as targeted and efficient as possible. We recommend to develop interdisciplinary training on sustainability, training that blends theory and practice. We encourage interdisciplinary and collaborative projects so that faculty in different disciplines can work in joint projects, research, teaching, and workshops. Open dialogue is definitely something very important. So the creation of forums for discussion and addressing resistance, and also allowing faculty to share concerns in a safe space. And lastly, again, share success stories, because highlighting these successful initiatives can demonstrate some practical benefits and help reducing skepticism. So on the QR code there, you will have access not only to the full survey report of the survey itself, but also Sulitest dedicated HLPF report. So we recommend you having a look. And thank you for listening. And now I'd like to pass on to John North, Executive Director of GRLI, who will be moderating our first panel. So John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gabriella. And it would be good if you could just indicate that you can hear me. Aurelian?
Yes,
okay.
we hear you.
So thank you very much also to Aurelian and Gabriella for presenting the results, both from the perspective of task and the faculty engagement survey. And just on behalf of the Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative, we are very proud to continue our association with our friends at Sulitest. So I'm joining you from South Africa on behalf of GRLI. I'm very pleased to present to you the first panel, which is around the discussions that we're having today to scale sustainability in higher education. And in panel 1, we will be looking at the role of measurement, the impact of good practices, and specifically viewed through the lens of those who measure and compare institutional performance. Now, we're not going to, in the interest of time, do lengthy introductions of each of our panelists. And we have placed on the screen a QR code, and I'm also placing in the chat a link to the profiles of this illustrious panel that we have. But thank you very much to the representatives for joining us. In preparing for this conversation, we suggested that we look at two aspects. And I'm going to start off by asking those on the panel to reflect firstly in a couple of minutes each, and we're going to have to keep it quite tight, but to reflect in a couple of minutes each on any of the recent or ongoing innovations or updates within their particular, whether it's a ranking, a rating, or an accreditation system, something that they're proud of, that they're working on. And in giving us an overview of that, perhaps also pointing to the type of impact or change that they are aiming to achieve as a result of that innovation or change. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that we have 3 panelists in the room in New York and 3 panelists online. So what I want to suggest is that we maybe kick off in the room itself, if that will be okay. And I'm going to turn first to Duncan Ross, who represents Times Higher Education. Duncan, if you could just share in 2 minutes. Thank you.
2 minutes is always going to be a challenge as well, you know, John. So firstly, it's great to be here with people who are working in the same space. And I think it's worth emphasizing that although we are sometimes seen as competitors, I'm looking at you, Lee, here particularly, when it comes to sustainability, we're all really trying to sing from the same hymn sheet, and that is to encourage and to provide levers that encourage universities to do more in this space. We know universities are already doing a lot. How can we help them or incentivize them to do more? And really, that's the thing I guess I'm proudest of, is the fact that through the work that we're doing, and at Times Higher Education, we have the luxury that some of us don't. We have an editorial arm. I know that the Financial Times also has an editorial arm, but a series of live, we're able to work in a broad way. But I'm particularly delighted by the number of institutions who have never really engaged in terms of data and in terms of accountability, in terms of what they're doing in any rankings, in any assessments, who are able to step forward and demonstrate the excellent work they're doing. And that's especially important when we think of the divide between the global north institutions, those who have the resources for measurement. Universities like McGill, I'm looking at there. And of course, the global south, where you frequently see institutions that really don't have that infrastructure for data collection, that haven't previously in the past been able to highlight the work that they're doing, because it doesn't necessarily fit in with the traditional ideal that we might have in North America and Europe of the research-intensive university. And really getting to the stage where we can enable and activate the however many universities there are. I'm going to say this week it's 30,000 universities in the world. No one really knows. But if we can engage and activate that group of organizations around the world, that is a really powerful driver towards delivering sustainability.
Right, thank you, Duncan. And staying in the room, since you've already mentioned Lee's name, can we perhaps turn Lee to your side, Lee Kamolans of QS? Maybe just 2 minutes from your perspective.
Okay, yes, thank you, John, and thank you, Duncan. So QS is coming at this whole discussion, I think, from a slightly different angle than some of the other rankings providers out there. We really have at the heart of what we're about, who we're about, the student. And I think this is a very important stakeholder that's often left out of these conversations. QS's mission is really about empowering motivated people around the world to fulfill their potential. And we've designed our rankings really with this informing students as the primary purpose. Of course, this also has the effect of driving change, within the institutions, and in many ways, actually commanding action that institutions wouldn't be taking otherwise if this absolutely vital stakeholder was not part of the conversation. So some recent research we did we found that over half of students are now actively researching the sustainability strategies or credentials of an institution as part of their process of selecting a university. However, only about 20% of those are satisfied with what they're seeing out there in the world. So we're, in a way, I'm quite proud that we have helped this sector actually move a little bit from lots and lots of talk about sustainability to for action. You know, at the end of the day, as a result of this dynamic, the bottom, line really of the institution, their existence, their financial sustainability is at stake if they don't take action, if they aren't seen to actively take action and really promote that. So digging a bit deeper into what QS has done, we've really started to look at some things around and primarily to inform the students, but understand the impact a bit broader around the impact of alumni of universities, around the knowledge exchange and partnership, and that real partnership towards the goals has been really vital in this.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Lee, for that preview. And we'll certainly come back to these topics that you raised. So again, staying in the room, if we can swivel the camera, and I think that's going to happen automatically. Andrew Jack of Financial Times, when you start sharing with us just a brief overview.
Yeah, thanks, John, and great to be here. Hello, everybody. So first of all, a reminder, obviously, the FT's focus on rankings is not university-wide, but business school specific, because we do think, as the seedbed, as it were, for the next generation of managers, entrepreneurs, investors, and others, this is a kind of important strategic area. And we also think our rankings are partly about prospective students as well as faculty and employers, whether it's recruiters or those seeking knowledge and ongoing engagement with business schools. First of all, around the SDGs, I'd say that the FT has been ranking business schools for over 20 years, and for example, on important SDG topics, including diversity, notably gender balance amongst students and faculty, that's something we've always tracked, as well as international, to try and capture that broad global audience and encourage learning, research, and teaching. In ESG or climate related stuff in particular, in the last couple of years, we've created space to look at both the operations of business schools and their wider universities through a metric around carbon audits, and also an objective and a ranking around net zero targets going forwards. And we've also tried to explore the very challenging area of the extent to which ESG is integrated into teaching. And going forwards, currently we're working on more experimentation around how, we can talk about the limitations of this, but how far one can try to measure SDG prioritization within academic output in all its rich forms. But the second thing I'd say is, while we do rankings, we also do a much wider range of broader editorial coverage on these important issues, because there are many things that you can't in any way reduce to simple numbers and metrics. So a reminder, we do a series of what we call responsible business education awards to showcase great practices. We did last year a magazine focused on sustainability and trying to highlight interesting new research and engaging with those authors to translate that into a form that would be most interesting for practitioners. We recently convened a roundtable of finance professors engaged around sustainability and how and what sort of a reading list, if you like, or resources and concepts should be integrated into basic finance courses on these areas. And we've also thinking about that education piece that we can contribute to. We've been launching a series of mini teaching case studies or case lists, again, trying to kind of identify topical issues and provide a resource that business schools and readers more generally can use to reflect on business dilemmas. So, and going forward, as I mentioned, we continue to explore ways in which we can measure research outputs, both high-level rigorous peer-reviewed content, but also wider contributions through books, through chapters, through conference participation, through dissemination of ideas into the world of practice as important measures to encourage and mobilize the sector to do more in the future.
Great, thank you very much, Andrew, for that preview. And as we transition to our online panelists who should be appearing on the screen now, just a reminder that the profiles of all our panelists are available on the link that's posted in the chat. And I think since we've now heard from some of the ranking institutions, maybe we can just stick to that for the moment and turn first to Professor Katrin Muff of the positive impact rating. Katrin, since you represent, I guess, already an innovation in itself through the work that you're doing with PIR, would you maybe care just to give us a quick snapshot of what you're proud of before we turn to our colleagues on the accreditation side?
Thank you so much, John, and it's a great pleasure to be here. Be even more fabulous to be in the room. So hello to everybody. It's great to see you. The positive impact rating is a rating, not a ranking. I think probably a big difference to what others are doing in the room. Actually, it's been co-developed with many of you present, John. You know, it's based on the framework we had developed originally with 50+20 and trying to kind of identify what an ideal business school should look like and translating that into a framework that so far students have been assessing their business schools and enabling business schools to measure where they are in terms of creating societal impact from a culture perspective, from a governance perspective, from an educational perspective, but also kind of from the institutional walking the talk. How is the institution engaged locally in providing impact? We've had so far 5 editions of the positive impact rating, more than 40,000 students that have responded and provided their schools with their perspectives. We have more than 100 schools that have now regularly participated and have been rated in the positive impact rating. What is new with us? What are we proud about? In the recent years, we have focused more in collaborating with existing other organizations and have worked on translating our results so that schools can use it to provide reporting to existing accreditation, such as AACSB we had introduced a couple of years ago. This year, new what we have done is honoring our long-term partnership with Prime, providing Prime schools with how their students rate their schools according to the 7 new Prime principles. And what we're announcing new for the 2025 edition is to do the same thing with EQUIS, so that business schools can actually use the data that the students provide in their EQUIS reporting. And I think what we're super excited about, and also kind of what we apprehend and anticipate with great interest, is we're expanding the student rating that we've had so far to include faculty. So this is an optional feature that business schools can opt into. We're gonna do this as a first pilot year and see how schools will actually fare, having these 2 stakeholders asking them the same questions and seeing what they provide, and really with the hope to enable and accelerate the transformation at the business school by providing them with more information. So that's some of the news that we have from the positive impact rating.
Great, and please do put a link in the chat, Katrin. So I'm going to, since you've mentioned AACSB and I can see Lily on the screen, I'm going to turn to you, Lily. Welcome. On behalf of AACSB, of course, maybe you can just give us a 2.5-minute overview, seeing as Duncan only took 1.5 minutes.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to give my time to Lily.
Thank you so much. I am so pleased to see this many like-minded organizations getting together, talk about this important topics. I'm not sure who is in the audience, but just for those, in case you don't know AACSB, we do have a long name, is Association to Advance Collegiate School of Business. Actually, this is the first accrediting body on earth that was established in 1916. And so we've been for more than a century to advance the quality of business education. But since our 2013 standard, which I was not part of that, the CIR and sustainability were incorporated in that. But in the recent change of 2020 standard, we have our accreditation standard. We researched there's so many terminology, and I was told there are potentially maybe 80 now, until now, maybe more. So we decided the team and organization landed in the term of societal impact, because ultimately we wanted to do through various different activity to create societal impact. It is a broad umbrella. We use the word societal to cover the social, the economics, and the environmental. So because we incorporate that into the standard, that would mean they become a requirement for the business schools to achieve the accreditation status with us. And we're very pleased that if you have our AACSB website, look at our accreditation report. Every year we see more and more schools submitting their initiatives that related to the societal impact. When we use the word societal impact for the business school context, of course, it's a one standard. Standard 9 talk about that. It's really woven into all of our standard, right? It's education. I think many conversation today is about business education. It need to be part of that, and research need to be part of that, right? Responsible research, and what kind of research that can create the impact. But last but not the least, the engagement, right? Through the education, the research and engagement, the AACSB always wanted to make sure our school can generate impact. But in addition to that, with many schools are doing great things on earth that we're serving, and we work very close with, and we also thought it is important for AACSB to amplify, to advocate for, to the society, to the business community, so people knows the school are very different. The business school are very different from the traditional, the accounting, marketing, management. Of course, it's still the core, but there are many new things the schools are doing. And I'm so pleased to see the ranking bodies, the rating bodies, and together with the accrediting body, we're doing a lot more things. I just want to highlight one recent change. This was recent, meaning this was 2023. We actually issued societal impact. I think a lot of word on the sustainability. There is a societal impact competency framework. Then they highlight 7 core skills with competency that's required for a leader to be competent leader in the societal impact. Welcome, go to the AACSB. I'm happy to put that into the link, right, and to share with you on those the framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lily. And keeping to accreditation, would be wonderful to hear also from Susan Hart, Associate Director at Equus and EFMD. Susan, can you just unmute yourself? Okay, Susan, as soon as we can hear from you, we'll come back to you, because we'd love to hear about the work being done at EFMD as well. So I'm going to suggest that, having heard at least from most of our panelists in terms of what they're proud of and what they're working on, that we move into the second part of the conversation, which is really around, I guess the context, if I can just give a little bit more, is that we know that we're facing a complex kind of network of global challenges, if you will. These things are all deeply interconnected, and seems to point to almost systemic failures across environmental, economic, and cultural dimensions. Now, forward-looking organizations like these on the panel would clearly recognize that there are major and urgent shifts needed to coordinate and to enable collective responses, and that collective responses will need deeper collaboration that stretches beyond the egos and the logos and the borders. So especially when we're thinking in institutional network terms, beyond the logos that are in the room. So the question then for the panel, and I see Susan has just joined us. So Susan, I'm going to start with you. The question then is, what steps may we take together to prepare for and promote collective impact across and beyond our sector? So putting aside our kind of, AACSB, PIR, FT, etc. hats for a moment, what can we do together to enable the kind of collective impact that we know is needed? Susan, I'm not sure if you were able to hear all of what was discussed before. Would you be willing to kick us off on this conversation? Or would you like to hear from the others first?
I'm very happy to kick off that conversation. I just wanted to say something that resonates very strongly with several of the presentations here. First of all, regarding EFMD and EQUIS, if I may, John, is that okay? Yeah, I'll do that very briefly.
Absolutely.
I would absolutely echo. I think it's great to see so many people in the room talking about these issues and getting together. I think that's incredibly important. As you know, that the EQUIS approach to this is something that we call ethics, responsibility and sustainability, and it is one of the standards. It's one of 3 what we call transversal standards. So it's a standard in its own right, alongside internationalization and connections that schools have with practice. And those 3 are important to think about together. And I think when I've been listening to everybody else around the table virtually and also there in New York, I think it's clear that there are these issues that go together in and around the whole question of how do we allow schools to really surface the kinds of research and pedagogies and even their own operation, which is illuminating what needs to happen in terms of ethical management, responsible management, and a focus on sustainability. And the idea of that being melded with internationalization or international perspectives, and also the perspectives of what we call practice. And by that, we don't just mean managerial practice, but rather the practice of policymaking organizations, local government, super government, in all of that space. Because when you get research in particular that is looking at these wicked problems that we have in society, economic, technological, societal, and to do with sustainability as well, they are likely to be international. They are likely to need the help, the sponsorship, and the access of other bodies of practice. And so these 3 interconnecting standards are incredibly important. And I do think that the question that you've asked about how can we work together, I mean, a couple of things that really struck me early on when we had a very interesting report from Gabriella and the example of schools, and Jean-Christophe and Aurélien, was also talking about the disciplinary silos. And one of the things I think we can all work on much more is how we can help to break these down, because essentially they are the lifeblood of academic institutions. And the way in which business schools have gone in the last, say, 30 years across the span of my career, a lot of business research has gone from being pragmatic in its focus to highly theoretical. Am I allowed to say largely unread by anything other than academics within a disciplinary silo? So I think we've got real leverage amongst all the different perspectives we have, whether it's rankings, ratings, or accreditation, to try and refocus, help schools refocus that. And I think they want to refocus that, but I think that the standards of academic disciplines are still real gatekeepers on the need for things to be highly theoretical, very focused, angels on pinheads, etc., etc. And that doesn't help the sustainability cause. That's the first thing. The other one that I thought was important, and this is the last one I'll talk about because I know we're pushed for time, was resistance to change. And I think every one of us around the table here is really well positioned to help break down that resistance to change, because we all in our own ways provide schools, if you like, with something of an imperative to think about what they do and how they present that, whether they're presenting it to a rankings body, whether they're presenting it to the ratings through Katrine's work, or indeed to ourselves in EQUIS and ACSB, in that we give them, if you like, a series of frameworks and ways in which that they can achieve something that perhaps is alongside, outside the traditional way in which they perceive they need to achieve. And if we can reinforce these messages across all of us, I think that becomes a much stronger motivation against the resistance to change. So those were my initial observations.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for opening the floor on that. I'm looking at the Panopticon there in New York to see whether Andrew, Duncan, or Lee are first to put up their hand to maybe respond. And Andrew, I think please go ahead. Yeah.
Sure, I won the bidding. Yeah, so talking about collective action, to me there are three areas. I mean, one is overall, if we're talking about metrics and we're talking about measurement, I think collectively there could be a lot more work done to agree certain common standards. And to me, you know, what we have to move from is sort of lots of measurement of input and throughput to outcome and impact. And that's fundamentally missing. And I think there's more that could be done in that space. And I think the more, a second point, that then organizations, great to hear about Katrina's newer initiative looking at faculty as well, the more that one could create then standardized and public selections of those assessments, the better, you know, whether it's the ASCSB and EQUIS with aspects of their accreditation reports. I would love to see with Prime and the SIP reports in their new generation some degree of standardization and public data that's consistent, impactful, and public. And then going into two final areas, so the teaching in particular, I think is one of the more tricky to measure, but I think more efforts to try to understand a consensus views of what core concepts and literature, for example, ought to be in, if you like, a green course that will be credible is one. And then on research, I think the collective area should be around, if you like, the ecosystem, the foundations of, again, ways to identify with open data, whether it's individual academics, so consistent universal adoption of ORCID numbers, for example, institutions, business schools in this case for me, so the use of RAW or some other identifier at the level of the faculty as opposed to the wider university. And then more generally, actually going beyond DOIs, i.e. for academic journal articles, to also look at more standardized open source reporting of books, of chapters, of conferences, of patents, of all sorts of wider forms of output, so that everybody could benefit and track and use, you know, that open data in the ways that they consider important.
Thanks, Andrew. Some really constructive suggestions there. Let's maybe just stay in the room in case there's something from Lee or Duncan, just some reflections on potential for collaborative alignment and collective action.
Okay, in the spirit of collaboration, Duncan seems very keen for me to go next, and I'm more than happy to. So I think looking at these rankings models in isolation is a little bit problematic. You know, I think they're useful tools. They've really driven change across the sector. As I was saying before, really sort of helped institutions move from talk to action. About 2 years ago, QS had its QS Asia Summit in Indonesia, and we had assembled thousands of leaders of institutions from across the region, and we're talking about sustainability. At one point during this event, we asked them to raise hands on how many of their institutions had some sort of sustainability plan or strategy in place. About a fifth of institutions in that room had some sort of plan in place, which really I found quite shocking at the time. Having done this again last year, you know, that had shifted to about half of institutions, and I think this is the power behind what we've done. But I think looking at the rankings in isolation is problematic. I think there's facilitation of this collaboration, facilitation of this opportunity to share best practices, learn from one another is, you know, absolutely vital here. And that's why it's been so great, you know, even in our context, to have the opportunity to work much more closely than we typically would with people like Duncan, people like Andrew and others from this space. I think, you know, this, we need to find a balance, though, when we are looking at some of the rankings models around this. Yes, it would be ideal to really measure the outcomes of what's going on in the world. But I think for many institutions who are a lot less sophisticated in the way they're using data around the world. I think they sometimes struggle to translate that into what they can actually do to influence those outcomes. So I think, sort of looking at this sort of area, ignoring the inputs, I think, you don't want to measure this based on inputs, but I think looking at some of that helps provide a little bit of a toolkit on, what action you can physically take to drive forward this conversation. Despite sort of collaboration, I think, being so important to this conversation, I think the fact that we've also created almost a healthy sense of competition in sort of providing that opportunity to sort of benchmark, understand what good looks like, draw out the comparisons, but do that in a way that also allows you to display some sort of uniqueness of what you're good at, because everyone can't be good at everything. It's actually been the most powerful thing that's happened out of the collaboration we've been doing through creating these rankings and so forth. And I think, the more sort of that environment where there is, healthy balance between collaboration and competition, I think really is going to continue to command action in the sector.
Absolutely. Duncan, would you like to build on that maybe?
Absolutely. I've got to agree with Lee, which is a rare thing. But it's really important when you're number one to have a number two chasing you to improve. More seriously though, I think I've got two hats on here for this answer. The first one is in my role as part of the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative and as one of the co-chairs of the Rankings, Ratings and Assessments Group. I've been delighted and inspired by the cooperation we've had across the industry, the work that Andrew and Lee have done and put into that, and others on the call. And some of the things that we are looking at for the future, which I think do try and reach out of some of that core work. Firstly, working with Quinn and the student group to try and identify the national ranking agencies, because Andrew, you talked about measurement of impact and measurement of teaching. That's a lot easier within a single nation context than it is when you look globally. And I think, Lee, we both agree that that's a challenge for us, as we have to go at the speed of the slowest almost in terms of how we assess. Within an individual nation, you can actually go much faster. So we're grateful for the work with the student group to try and drive that forward. We're also looking at how we can work with the professional accreditation organizations, not just within business schools, but we know that there are these agencies that accredit engineering courses, medical courses, and more. And if we can encourage those organizations to change their accreditation criteria, then very quickly we can change the curricula across many universities. And so we're working on that. We're working with the bibliometric organizations, or we will be shortly, to try and get some agreed baselines, if you like, for how you can take those outputs from research that are so often used for evaluating both institutions and individuals, and where they relate to the SDGs, have them working on a more common basis. And finally, again, in terms of the impact work, we've been doing some work over the last year with the Joint Task Force. It's called rather grandiosely, because never let it be said that the United Nations didn't create great sounding names for things. The Joint Task Force on Impact, with Deborah Rowe and the Publishers Compact Fellows, really trying to again understand how we can encourage the sector to move towards a more impact-focused approach to research publications. Very briefly, because I did give up 30 seconds earlier, what's Times Higher Education doing? We recognise that actually for this to be effective, it's not just got to be universities working in isolation within the nice private gardens, the beautiful walled gardens that we create in higher education. We need to reach out as a sector to governments, to private sector, to non-government organisations, and involve them in the process. And we're starting to see that. We're seeing governments like the Thai government refocus their economic policy around the SDGs, and crucially place the role of higher education within that delivery context. So that's some of the things we can do, and we should do as a sector, working together to promote this across society broadly.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Duncan. And maybe just turning back online, we would love to hear also Katrine, maybe from you next, and then go to Lily, and then we can see if there are any burning questions in the chat or any concluding remarks. So Katrine, over to you.
Thanks so much. Interesting thoughts from all of you in the room. I would really second what Andrew was suggesting in terms of making data publicly available. I think if we want to measure and we want to compare, we do need to make sure that we've got data available. Big point, big important point. We are working on our end to make sure that schools can use their data as easily as possible across the different accreditations that they have to work for. I also love what Duncan just now suggested around working with national accreditation agencies. I'm a big promoter, and I think, John, thank you for bringing up this question, and thank you for what GRLI has done in the last, 2 decades or 1.5 decades nearly of asking that question again and again and again, and for holding the space for it. It is a tricky question to ask, and there is no evident answer, as we're seeing here still with all these brands and the spirit of competition that is there. I think we really need to move above and beyond it. We are in so many ways self-referencing ourselves in that small community of maybe what are we talking about? 2,000 business schools, maybe at most, that we are even touching. And I heard somebody talk about a number of 30,000 business schools out there anyway. We do need to accelerate reaching all of those schools out there. And I think we can do that together by walking the talk, by holding up that spirit of collaboration. And I really look forward to seeing what we can do, maybe as an outcome recommendation here from everybody, just doing a little step more together.
Yeah, and as we turn to Lily, I have to add to that, Katrine, that I think what you're touching on is perhaps this living systems approach that we've been following in GRLI, which is neatly summed up in the phrase, the process we use to get to the future is the future we get. So let's model that, right? Lily, you've been very patient, but you have not had a chance to respond to the question around what small step we might take together to achieve collective impact, if you would like to share.
Thank you. I think we probably should give each other a big credit, because if you see this rating agency, ranking agency, or media, or EFMD and ACSB, we all do similar things, right? This is the movement. Maybe sometimes we don't use the similar terminology, but we are actually creating a movement. I think that's something that's great for society. I wanted to echo the message, and some of you already mentioned, the interconnectivity cannot stay alone in the business school. This is for all of us, right? The context. I always say the business school exists is to serve and advance the business community. That linkage, not at the end, that from the beginning, when you view the sustainability or societal impact curriculum or anything, or research, that's the starting point. You understand the needs. And so you can train the future leader, future talents for that. So the interconnectivity is the key. Also with the government entity to continue to influence them. This is the important area. I think some region is doing, globally is doing better than the other region. And so I also wanted to highlight, I don't know, some of you mentioned, maybe not, sustainability or societal impact shouldn't be an add-on. Right, and recently I was in UK and visited a few schools and talking to the deans. When the new incomers, the first year undergrad student coming in, they did a survey. Are you interested in all this area? One of the area they used the term sustainability management. You see 80% of them say yes, I'm very interested. Then you see that you sign up for the focus of the major. You have 5. So I think we cannot put it as an add-on. It needs to be embedded. I know many schools or many of you are doing that. I think that's the key, regardless what major, regardless you're in business school, even outside business school, it should be, I would say, start with the mind, right? Before you could think about that, you start with the mind, the kids. I mean, luckily the Gen Z, I would say they're better than the other generation, which is the great news. Start from them so they get trained, embed that into everything else. My last point I wanted to make is it cannot be in silo. I want to emphasize, I think, Suzanne, you made that message as well, that interdisciplinary, I don't know how we can solve the problem with one discipline. It's just not possible. So the various disciplines, from the article, from the research, from the journal, we need to think about in a very different ways. And in addition to business education, that's another area I think continuously we need to work together.
Thanks. And I know, Susan, that you did have your hand up earlier, so maybe you were ready to respond to something that you were hearing from the other panelists in this regard.
Yes, I mean, it was just a small point, just that because I didn't do the opening part, it was in response to and in support of what Andrew was saying about the need for greater levels of data, and we're trying to work on that now. We've got a new and revised Standard 5 on research, particularly, which gives much more opportunity for schools to report in quantitative as well as qualitative ways on the kind of research that they're doing that wouldn't necessarily fall into the single silo journal academic discipline publication, but rather across the patch in collaboration with organisations where it can have impact. So I think that's really important. I think we could all work on ways of doing that more. I think that's an important way forward.
I think let's just take 30 seconds and hear whether there are any concluding remarks from each of our panelists. I'll start in the room. Any kind of aha moments or insights or key messages that you want to leave? Lee, if you want to maybe start.
Yeah. I think the way we've come together here, is almost the beginning of a conversation. Yes, we've been talking in different contexts, for many years now, but I feel like I don't know. This is a moment of change, of transformation. I think as all these discussions about sharing information and data sometimes ignores this reality of the sector that is a very competitive environment, especially the business school space. A lot of those institutions, will collaborate in certain ways, but will also hold their cards very close because they are competing with each other for their very existence. And I think us as third-party organizations looking at the sector from outside, we can provide those opportunities to collaborate in a really, really healthy way, create the right levels of transparency around this information, and sort of drive this conversation forward in a way that I think those individual players out there really would struggle to. And I think all of us here should continue to talk and drive forward that agenda quite actively.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for expressing that intent. Please go ahead. Was it Duncan?
I think to build on that, one of the things that we have seen over the last few years, I'm sure you've seen the same, is that by creating the mechanisms for institutions to report on sustainability, we've actually supported universities in not just the creation of this data, because some of this data was already there, but actually bringing it centrally into a single location. Now, there's nothing stopping universities and other higher education institutions from publishing that data themselves. Absolutely nothing stopping them. Just because we ask for it doesn't mean that they can't use it in other ways. And I would strongly encourage them to do that. Transparency is something that is oddly lacking in this sector, which is, it's like a walled garden. You're on the outside of a walled garden. It doesn't look like a garden. It looks like a castle. And we need to bear this in mind. But one other thing that I think is coming out and which we need to be very aware of is how we use language. Because often within specific disciplines, we use very technical or jargon-laden language, which doesn't necessarily translate when we move into the policy sphere, or when we're talking to students, or when we're talking to the private sector. And we need to be more open to plain language so that what we're saying, which is really important, can get out there and can affect change.
Yeah, great language. Andrew, and if we can just keep it brief.
Yeah, so actually great to have the collaboration. I mean, great momentum. I definitely see business schools and institutions kind of moving in this direction, which is excellent. I think we have to realize the limitations of metrics. You know, there are certain things that just they cannot do. But I'm all for, as we say, open data, establishing, as it were, industry-wide standards, bringing in the voice not only of those groups here, but for example, the journal publishers, the academic subgroups, you know, other groups that have some point of leverage and so on. And I think, you know, I'm very open to this cooperation, but you know, going back to the point about the process determines the outcomes. I mean, to be honest, I'm just a little frustrated that there's a bit too much process and not enough action, and I want to move to outcomes.
Very, very good. And moving online then, Susan. You're on mute. Let's just go to.
Sorry.
Yep.
No, I think there are limitations absolutely to data, but I do think that the sharing of the information that we have in any more public forum, I think putting together, you know, again, you don't want talking shop after talking shop, but we're going to have to continue this conversation in another forum as well in order to get some actions coming out of this. And I think there are plenty of ideas and we need to take them forward. So I think a future more focused event again would be well, a working meeting would be something that would be helpful in order to come out with actual action.
Great. Thanks, Katrine.
I second that. Yeah, let's, I don't know who said it, let's make this the start of a new, different conversation. GRLI, grab it.
Of course. Lily, thanks.
Great session, good conversation. I just wanted to say that there are a lot of best practices and or maybe good practice a lot of business schools that are doing, and we do share on the website. I know many of you also do that. So that is progressive sharing. So let's continue the conversation. Hopefully we can accomplish the common goal.
Wonderful. And I think with that, it's a wrap. And from my side, firstly, to our panelists, thank you very much for contributing to the conversation. We'll most certainly continue to support this type of work. Thank you to those that have been engaging in the chat. And very importantly, thank you to our hosts that have made this possible, our friends at Sulitest, along with all the other partners that have been working on these initiatives. I will hand over to Kathleen for the next panel, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you to John and our previous panel. He's given us lots of food for thought. And I'd like to give the opportunity now to networks, practitioners who are actually working on the ground and scaling innovative practices. I think there is huge power in networks. Our previous panel has spoken a lot about the power of networks, you know, having multi-stakeholder engagement and recognizing that this is a domain that has continued to evolve over the past few years. I remember starting in the role of environmental officer at McGill University in Montreal, Canada in 2001. That was long after McGill had signed on to the Talloires Declaration in the late 90s and the Halifax Declaration. And I think nothing really happened because I don't think necessarily resources were dedicated to it. You didn't have one person responsible for making recommendations happen. And even when I took on the job, I didn't have a lot of background in what to do. So it was really the power of going to conferences, meeting with colleagues who were starting work in the domain, to learn, to exchange, and then slowly building up. You know, almost 25 years later. Yeah, the SDG report that was just released last week is showing that we're not really moving the needle. After, you know, all this time, we're actually regressing. 17% of the SDGs are on track, but half have minimal progress, 1/3 are stalled or regressed. The UN has recognized that there's need for peace and financial support and an implementation surge that would be really urgent for keeping us on track to achieve the SDGs, stay within 1.5 degree limit. So now this is emergent strategy. We are trying to expand on the successes, be appreciative in our approach, look at what's happening, how can we get more of that? as the previous panelist said, really focus on the outcomes and impacts. And with regards to what we're doing here in higher education, the research, the education, the service to society mission that we have, trying to move top down, bottom up through the obedient middle, as some call it, to look at what steps we can take together to prepare for and promote this kind of collective impact that's urgently required now. SDGs and to Duncan's point earlier about leaving no one behind. So maybe this time we'll reverse it. We'll start with our panelists who are online. Shall we start with Megan from the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education? I'm keeping time, so if you hear my phone go off, you will know why. I just wanted to ask for this round of questions, if you could talk a little bit about some of the inspiring practices that, in your respective networks that have uncovered, that can be replicated, but, not just the successes, but also learning from failures, as some people say, failing forward, so that we can facilitate that kind of broader implementation that we were needing, such as the recommendations from our previous panel, how Jack was saying, more transparency and open data. We, trying to translate more data to action, talking about also trying to make sure that intersectoral collaboration, but also using plain language, or Katrine talking the accelerating the spirit of collaboration, and Lily's point about sharing best practices and interdisciplinarity, and Susan about qualitative research, and trying to focus really on achieving the outcomes and the impacts that we're trying to do. That's really urgently needed. So I'll start with you, Megan.
Question, Kathleen, for 2 minutes. But first of all, hi, everyone. Really lovely to be with you all. I'm Megan Faith-Honheiser, and though I'm by myself in my office in Philadelphia, I actually am here representing thousands of sustainability change agents at campuses around the globe. Faculty, staff, and students that are working day in and day out, not just to understand the breadth and depth of sustainability, but to implement sustainability throughout the curriculum, research, operations. For the past 20 some odd years at this point, almost 25, ASHE has been working to convene and really catalyze higher education to lead the sustainability transformation. And in terms of innovation, there is certainly no shortage from our members, but building on the theme of this session, bridging from the first panel to this one, I would be remiss if I just didn't speak about our STARS program. ASHE has been working to assess sustainability in higher education for the past 20 years, thinking about how we measure holistically, comprehensive, what does that look like within institutions of higher education. And we've just released our STARS version 3.0, the work of thousands of technical advisors, faculty, staff, and students, as well as government agencies and other nonprofits that have been weighing in on a system that has been developed not just for higher education, but by higher education. And I'm so grateful for the previous panel and what I heard of the enthusiasm and receptivity around collaboration. I do think, while I'm very excited about our new system, STARS, and the fact that we've engaged over 1,000 campuses across 55 countries in our tool, I think there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for meaningful collaboration amongst the organizations represented here today, and there are some that are not. And Andrew, when you said common data set, I was like, you looked at my notes for this session. I am really, really heartened to hear, again, the receptivity and sort of what I'm hoping is real mobilization for a common data set for sustainability in higher education, because the thousands of sustainability champions that you can't see, but I am representing, they are the ones that are getting emails from you all about submit this data. We have to make it easier for them to complete all of the requests that we're sending their way, and to report their sustainability data. Let's make it easier for institutions to participate in all of our assessment tools by streamlining the data that we're collecting. And truly, I think getting at the question you raised, Kathleen, by streamlining and increasing efficiencies for already sustainability staff that are already limited in capacity and resources, we owe them, we owe them our time to make some of these, have some of these difficult discussions around how we can streamline our data collection, because we want them focused on implementing sustainability action and creating impact, not chasing data points for all of us. Now, thanks, Kathleen.
Thanks, Megan. And now let's turn it over to Meredith from the Principles for Responsible Management Education.
Thanks, Kathleen. And maybe before moving to my examples there, to just echo what was just said, because I do feel that that was something that spoke to me from the last panel as well. So I'm Meredith Story. I have a PhD in business education for sustainable development. I was previously with Paul's organization, SDSN, and now with Prime. Through the process of coming through these different networks, if you know Prime, and I imagine you do because you're sitting in those chairs right there, it's synonymous with those SIP reports, with the fact that you've got to report every other year and tell these stories. And our reports don't have a minimum framework there. So as we were moving through and we were learning from other organizations, we were really beginning to reflect upon the process of what it means to be an educator who does have good pedagogy and does have good practice in their classroom, who does have something inspirational that we can take from them to learn, to grow, to share, and to then echo for the rest of the community. So we've been lucky at Prime to have the Impactful 5 grant from the LEGO Foundation, which has helped us to learn what works in curriculums for business schools around the world through our signatory members, but through our chapter representation, where what works in what area might be very translatable into other areas. It's just that we never had the bridges built to be able to construct these messages from one finance professor to another, from one marketing professor to another, or even across disciplines. So to have the infrastructure and the connections available to lessen the distance for sharing good practices is one thing that the Prime community is often looking for. And to have all of you in the room today, I think just to build that a step further and echo what Megan said, where it's not just about who can write the best report and who can get the data in the greatest alignment to tell the most impactful story, but to really lessen the distance in what it means to be a good educator, a good pedagogue, and to have that recognition component, to be able to have the evidence-based research behind it, and to scale and share in a way that makes sense for global scaling, for the organizations that are here, but also for action at the end of the day. I've taken a lot of inspiration from the different points around narrative and data drivers that have been pointed out. I think just to continue to keep that mindset and lessen the distance for what it means to be a good educator, what it means to be able to speak to sustainable development in the classroom, but then to bring that to the network level for the recognition and global scaling efforts.
Great, thank you so much. And it's so great that you have funding to be able to do this. And I think that's going to be one of the questions that I might ask later on, of course, to resourcing. But let's bring it back to the room. Can we have Paul from Sustainable Development Solutions Network?
Good to see you, Meredith. My name is Patrick Paul Walsh. I'm actually a career academic in University College Dublin, but I've been working with Jeffrey Sachs since 2007. I was on the SDSN, and now I'm gone. After COVID, I decided to go into operations, meaning I stepped in as Vice President of Education and Director of the SG Academy, so replacing Chandrika. Okay. So my problem here, I'm just not sure, do you know what SDSN is or what they do, right? But just very briefly, Jeffrey Sachs set this up for Ban Ki-moon to basically have taught leadership and academics reviewing the work programs in the what was called the post-2015 agenda. So the Secretary General's area, Amina Mohammed at the time was co-chair with Jeff, and they produced a census report, which was given to the co-facilitators that produced the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So that's its origin, right? Since then, we were more like a think tank reporting into Amina Mohammed, where it's academics basically trying to mobilize the private sector, governments, and civil society into implementing the powers to biodiversity SDGs at all levels of governance. Okay, so that's what it is, right? But to give you a sense of the business model for us was we were lucky enough just to be funded by billionaires, right? So the basic idea was Ted Turner, Gates, Jeffrey Sciala. And what did we do with that money? Well, we basically produced resources, free resources, open resources under Creative Commons. So that you might know the SDG index, right? So we started ranking countries by all the 169 targets and whatever they are indicators, 233. If you notice, the UN itself does not rank countries by SDG progress because it's too political. Right? You know, you can imagine what happens to the best countries when you incorporate environmental damage and so on. Why they become the worst countries. Right? So that was never going to happen. It says something about who dominates the boards of these institutions, right? But we've been doing that, and we have our last report. So that's very useful for our network. So we have 2,000 universities, but the most important thing is about 65 chapters in countries, and they can use progress on the SDGs that we're measuring, and they help us obviously put together the indicators to maybe hold the government to account a bit. So, and we encourage those chapters through science policy to even go into the governments and start talking about this, supporting their BNOs in particular, and functional reviews, etc. Right. The other thing we give them is what I'm looking after, and Emeritus was part of that, was the SDG Academy. So we started producing, initially we produced the Ages of Globalization, Jeffrey Sachs course on Coursera, and it was open and free. But today we have 50 courses, which our main platform is edX, but we're on the Chinese and we're on other types of platforms. We're 10 years old, and we're doing a report that we released in a couple of weeks where we have 1 million users on those 50 courses. So that's what's happened. That's just, but the other thing though is all the individual videos on those courses are in our library, which we give to everyone for free under Creative Commons, and we don't track them. So I'm forever going around the world, like into the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Oh yeah, the SDG Academy, we have a whole elective on that, and we give a minor, and and the same in Ireland with the new technical college, the Advantage Fair Technical University. Said, would I be an external examiner, given that we use all your courses to actually teach the electives? And even somebody came from me from Ernst & Young to tell me, they have a master's on sustainability, and we use all your SDG Academy courses. So one thing I'm coming to challenge and stuff, I'm kind of thinking how you go to millions to billions. And one of the answers is to use library of DSpace, it's to use library digital repositories. Because the benefit of them is that you can trace each individual object to use, and that's actually a very important thing, right? So like we've put up stuff, we've tried things like LinkedIn. I think we only did it for just under the last 2 years. So I think there's 36,000 users on that. But that's why is that important then for our networks? Well, they can in their universities say, look, there's this free resource, you can use it in the classroom. It gives them that sort of like the data, the resource, and then of course we in our different projects like the Net Zero Pathway project, or the FABLE project, land use projects, or so on and so forth. It's all about just creating frameworks and resources to hand to the academics at country level, and they can somehow use that to mobilize whatever they want to at country level, etc. So was there something? Yeah, the interesting thing about the networks, though, is that the SDG Academy, and I'll tell you later about, we're going to ask about challenges and to get to systems. We have a different family, our community of practice, to those who use the SDG index, right? And then, so even SDGs today, or global schools, so nearly every, let's call it, product line that we have has different communities. So that's kind of interesting in itself, right? But I guess the common feature is that centrally we have a secretariat that's funded with that philanthropic money to produce these open source and open access resources that then can be used to train teachers. This, and that's is that inspiring? Is there lessons there? I don't know. I'd say most of you here are saying we're not going to give away stuff for free, and where do you get that philanthropic money to do it? But the reality is, though, is that we do courses on nature and society. we're not doing stuff on necessarily, we do macro a little bit, and we are, I'll tell you later, we are turning to training ESG stuff, but like we are doing the stuff with science policy interface that nobody wants to create. They don't see a commercial value to it, right? So we basically, you know, represent nature in a sense and represent the force of the poor, and create courses that actually document that within the institute framework, and that's why it gets used and it's successful. So I'll share the reports. The analytics are interesting. I think it's India, US, Nigeria, the top 3 countries for some reason on the million use. Like there's all sorts of statistics in that report which you can have a look at. But I think what's different is the business model is philanthropic, give it to us. We're a group of academics, and we say to them, we do what we want. You don't tell us what to do, because academics don't know what to do. I don't pay them. But then we produce really nice resources that are used very extensively.
Right, thank you. For there's a lot of stuff that's happening on the SDSN front.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And I'll now bring it to Quinn from SOS and
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I should say co-chair, and very, very collaborative space that is. But really, honestly, so delighted to be here with colleagues in person and online. And I think actually so much of the contribution I want to make in this discussion is talking about the role of partnership and collaboration in achieving all of this. And actually looking around the table, so many partners that we've worked with over the years that have been so essential in driving forward really catalytic change in the sector. So SOS International, Students Organizing for Sustainability International, is a coalition of student-led organizations collaborating across 21 member organizations, representing a collective voice of 3.5 million member students. We have a rotational presidency, and that's currently held by the All Africa Students Union. So really collaboration at the very heart of how we even function as an organization. We want to see sustainability deeply integrated, like a golden thread, through all parts of the education system, and seeing that done in a way that is high quality, solution-centered, hands-on, and relevant to students' own lived experiences, their cultural experience, their communities, their disciplines, their future career ambitions, like all of their learning needs to be really contextualized in their own lived experience. One of the key ways that we can make that happen is, to pick up on this theme from Kathleen's question, is around partnership and collaboration working, right? So all of our work is done through and by students working in partnership with their institutions and with key stakeholders right across the sector. And the key we're into this space, right? Because I feel like around this virtual and in-person table, there's a huge amount of ambition, right? And I think working in partnership with students can be a real enabler in this, because students can sometimes, very often, bring possibly a more radical, challenging perspective to the table. And actually, by working together with them alongside in real equal and active partnership, you can play a nice game together, right? Like, I suspect there's ambition from folks in this room and from folks online who think, you know what, I would love to challenge my organization, love to challenge my institution to go that bit further. And actually, I would say through our work, where the real magic happens is when that passionate staff member, senior leader, actually works alongside young people and students in their institutions to say, you know what, there's some collaboration that we can do here to understand the relative strengths, the relative power dynamics, the positionality that we have within our organizations and within the wider sector. And I think that genuine partnership working can be such an enabler if we see young people as real equal partners in that. And in order to see them as equal partners, we need to support them to be at the table and to be in these spaces with training, capacity building, funding, resource, all of that. I want to give, because I know we were encouraged to bring real examples to this. I want to give the example of the Responsible Futures program in this. Responsible Futures has been around for 10 years in the UK. We've piloted it in partnership with the International Association of Universities over the last year globally in 7 countries around the world. And over the last 10 years, the Responsible Futures program has provided a really key framework for students and staff to work together in partnership to reform what sustainability education looks like at the institution. So really deeply integrating sustainability into the formal curriculum, into the informal curriculum, and into the subliminal curriculum. And doing that in a way where students are really working closely with their institution. It's assessed through a student-led audit. So students are actually holding their institution to account on this. And working with institutions, they've implemented 3,000 specific actions to support sustainability education. We've worked now with 48 institutions, reaching 1.1 million students globally. 230 students acted as auditors within their institutions, really pushing and driving forward that reform. And that, I think, is a really rich example of what that partnership can actually drive, right? When we bring the right people together around the right table with the shared vision that I think we all have, we can have that really catalytic transformation that we need to see in the sector.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and it's super inspiring. And I think to your point, you know, organizations need to really, really do that kind of upskilling in empowering students, you know, doing a power match. You know, at McGill University, we used to do workshops on that, you know, on power, on understanding where it is, where it lies in the institution, and really showing students how they really are able to challenge their institutions and move them forward. And even at McGill, it was really good to help drive things forward. So I'm not going to talk that much more because I got the time warning from JC. All JC's fault. Always JC's fault. But very quickly, I'd like you to be just a little bit reflective on how's it worked on barriers and how networks and initiatives can collaborate to affect change at a systems level. You know, whether it's innovating in technologies, practices, approaches, you know, leading and capacity building for change, whether it be, you know, collaborating for changes to regulations or trying to find incentives, funding, resources to help build stronger institutions and to kind of like move this behavior training, shifting the norms in the way we work and the way we operate. So I'll go back to Megan.
Kathleen, you were a little bit broken there, but I heard words like collaboration and networks. So I think based on our prep, the idea here is how are we collaborating? How are we increasing our collective impact? And truth be told, every time I hear about the work that SDSN, Prime, SOS, all these different groups are doing, it's so encouraging, right? Because we're all part of this big family. And I continually think about what are the ways that we can amplify each other's work? What are the strengths that each of our organizations bring that are unique, that ASHE doesn't need to do because Prime is doing, or vice versa, et cetera. So that's what I'm thinking is like, we talk about collaboration, we talk about partnerships ad nauseum at the UN events, and I'm interested, as was mentioned in the previous panel, in moving beyond just talking and like, okay, what's the follow-up conversation from this about how we can actually expand our collective impact? What does meaningful collaboration look like? What are the pieces that are coming up for each of your organizations? I mean, Quinn mentioned Responsible Futures. ASHE is going to be working with SOS International with Responsible Futures, because that's super exciting. So I just wonder if there are particular examples where we can each bring together these really, I think, again, the unique contributions that each of our associations and networks has, and recognizing that there are other networks not represented in the room here today, that we also, there's ASHE is one of like a number of other, we have sister organizations throughout the globe that are very similar in size and scope. So I guess that's the piece that comes to me. I'm very interested in actually moving beyond conversation to action, and in like having conversations following up from this meeting about what we can do to amplify each other's efforts.
Thanks so much, Megan. And I think JC had actually started a spreadsheet of all the different networks and who's doing what. So maybe I think we might just have volunteered to lead another working group on mapping of networks and trying to kind of foster that kind of collaboration. But
And the common data set. I'll volunteer.
Yeah, Megan forgot to mention that she's also a member of the Ratings, Rankings, and Assessments Working Group. So really amazing, all the collaboration that's already moved. Sorry, I'm getting, so sorry, Meredith?
All right, I'll go quick, but to think through the journey process as an educator or the higher education institution would think of it, what are the barriers? The barriers are accreditation, the barriers are ranking, the barriers are knowing which organizations to reach out to for which resources at the right moment, the barriers are knowing how to best engage your students. So to look at the people in this room right now, it's a bit like the Justice League. Like there isn't a barrier that can't be solved if all of us just talk to each other and really solve these problems together. So for me, from the Prime perspective, events like this do help move the needle, but to speak to what Megan was saying, to do more than just signaling, to actually lessening the distance in what that journey looks like. We've been doing that a lot in our own process through moving from SIP to Commons with listening, learning, reflecting, and responding in order to limit the barriers for what the journey looks like for an educator. But I think there's just so many other barriers that we could be considering what's here that we can lessen that distance just by having the conversation and understanding what the strengths and limitations of the process and the resource and the connections that we bring together.
Just on time, Meredith, that was perfect. Paul.
Yeah, so what I said to Jeff when I came in, because he's always very ambitious, but I'd like to say something that's even more ambitious than he is, which is I wanted to change these million users to billions. And really, I just got into the idea is how, just because content is free, it's not used. I mean, let's be honest, right? So we have to say, well, how do we mobilize this? And I'm not going to go through the library project, but working with that sort of platform, we've started to work with governments. So for example, with the Climate Action Plan in Ireland, every government department and civil servant, including university academics, etc., have to do sustainability training. Right, so we basically work with them and their LMS, put our content in, they put their own content, etc. We're starting to do this with corporates, and we're starting to do this with universities. Universities are tricky using other lecturers' material, but the way we do it is say, think of it as an ebook, think of it as just a resource that you put into a thing. I wanted to square it with Duncan though, with that one of the things we are doing with any of these training initiatives, whether it's government or corporate or university, is having a micro-credential that actually gives it a pathway into the others. Right? So don't just do a bit of training and leave it there. Say, actually, a next step, you could build it. So we have a master's pathway in TCD, for example, from the education of the Irish government, or, and so I think that's actually really important, the vocational side, the government training, corporate training, executive training, that you have these components that be interoperable and create pathways into other types of training, and it becomes interesting. And then the final thing is we need government legislation. So we've set up a legal committee inside UNESCO, working with their ministers of education, etc., to actually train the policymakers how to, for example, it's the OER recommendation, open education. So they want free textbooks at all levels of learning, right? And the thing is, in all countries, committees and academics write all the material. They do a great job, and then in a moment of lunacy, they sign all the copyright over for a publisher. And then the publisher goes on the internet and has a kind of per technology in LMS, and then it's charged every year and update the book every year. So what we're going to do is a bit of a playbook to say, no, bring it, archive it like this, license it like this, distribute it like this. It does not have to be commercialized, and so that's the type of work we're doing to, if the government start legislating all of this, then you'll go from millions to billions pretty quickly. Right? But that's what you have to do.
No, that's really great, and I think some networks are collaborating to move on local to regional to international levels for this kind of mobilization of regulation as systems change factor. I think would be really powerful. Yeah. Last but not least, let's go Quinn.
Thank you. I'll keep it really brief. I'm aware of time. I think there's a major challenge that we all face, right? And that's we all do good work in our spaces, in our realms, in our areas of expertise. What we really need to be seeing, I think, right now to actually accelerate the change that we need to see to actually make HE fit for purpose today is to actually say, you know what, I don't think the best actually is out there right now, right? So you can come at the top of our rankings, you can come at the top of our ratings, you can perform well in all of these spaces, but do we actually have right now an HE system that is fit for purpose? Right? Like we have to be honest with ourselves there. And I think we need to look at some really catalytic systemic drivers that we can collectively influence and reform. Those, I think, are the conversation around rankings, ratings, accreditation bodies, professional and statutory regulatory bodies. It's around government policy. It's around professional development and support for educators, and making sure that students are partnered into each of those discussions. There are thousands and thousands of universities around the world, and even if you totted up all the institutions we work with, we're only just scratching the surface, and there's inevitably incredibly good practice sitting in institutions that do not have the privilege or the resource or the capacity to feed into any of the things that we're talking about today. So I really just challenge us to work together on those really big catalytic reforms that the folks around this table and beyond in our online space here can absolutely influence.
Thank you so much, Tim. And I love Meredith's comment about this being the Justice League. So I think I've just started something right here. And I am totally imagine that we'll continue these conversations moving forward. And I think one technological systems change agent relating to our ranking and accreditation organizations is with regards to the future of AI and education, which is another SE action group. The SDGs in practice kickoff session included a keynote speaker who spoke about how universities will do it probably in 10 years, but we are no longer training students to be future ready. We need to paradigm change now. So I would love to continue this conversation, but we need to wrap it up. So I'm going to turn it over to Estella to close off this session. Thank you all our panelists. It was amazing.
Thank you so much, Kat. And thank you so much for all of our speakers as well, for sharing your time with us today and for doing the work that you do, for pushing really for change and for supporting the universities and the educators and for creating this environment where this change can flourish. I feel that after this amazing conversation, I don't have much to add, but I think this event really highlighted the importance of collaboration for good. We said that word countless times. And we know that competition exists. Competition exists between the universities all of us are working with. But this event is a really good example that even competitors can find really good reasons to collaborate for changes that are bigger than us. And these big changes are calling us to be collaborating, because sustainability is really it's really a race that we have to run together. So it's really encouraging to be hearing the panelists from both conversations really talking about moving from this conversation to action and how we can really collaborate. Over the last 5 years, I've worked at Sulitest as account manager. So I've been working with hundreds of educators as they roll out some of our tools, and their commitment to be educating what is really my generation has always been inspiring. But I've also seen a lot of frustration as they meet loads of those barriers. So I think this really fuels me and fuels the work that we do at Sulitest and that we all do here in this table, that is to advocate for systems change. So I'm really happy to hear, and it's really encouraging, and it really brings a lot of hope, this conversation. To be hearing networks talking about streamlining processes, lessening the distance, so that educators can really be focused on creating that positive impact. Thank you for those networks on the table for really supporting the institutions in truly embedding sustainability throughout education, as Quinn highlighted. And a big thank you also to ranking and accreditation bodies for putting the incentives and rewards in the right place. It's really encouraging to hear Susan talking about breaking silos, Lily and Duncan talking about reaching beyond civil society to government, and Andrew talking about agreeing on common standards, because we really need to be speaking the same language when it comes to sustainability. We don't want competing efforts between ranking well on THE or QS or getting a CSB accreditation and so on. John said it really well, that we need to move beyond logos and egos, because we're trying to get to the same place. And to get to that place, we need, I would say, two quick things. We need analytics and data to be honest with ourselves, and we need to be involving the students in the process, as very well articulated by Quinn as well, to listen to them, to work with them in a really good partnership. I think today we've seen really insightful data and really inspiring stories. So that's the call that I wanted to leave for everyone in the audience. One, start gathering data and start putting them to good use to guide the journey ahead. Two, identify good levers, incentives, and rewards that you have in the system around you, so you can really create the change you can really create the case for the change that you're trying to promote. And 2 years ago, when we hosted an event similar to this, I closed with saying that we are all learners and we are all educators. So my third call is seek the stories around you, stories of success and stories of failures, so that the community that you're working with, the educators that you're working with, can really relate to them and also share your stories. So with that, on behalf of Sulitest and of our speakers here today, I'd like to say thank you so much for spending these 2 hours with us and for joining this event, and join us in mainstreaming sustainability literacy together. Thank you very much.